nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have not had anyone approach me for public comment, so we will. Anyone? Pardon me?
Oh, okay.
It's on. Am I on? I know I don't know about these things. Like you can't. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. No public comment. We have Supervisor Hagen is on WebEx. And next we will approve the March 6, 2025 Triple ED Committee meeting minutes. We have a motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Lemmer. All in favor? Aye. That is unanimous. On to number 5, policy issues discussion and potential committee determination, none. 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. A, discussion and possible action by Triple ED. 1, request from Domtar for a letter of support for Rothschild Dam modernization project. So we will turn that over to Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, Mr. Fawcett is here, I should say, from Domtar to talk through just at a high level, and there's some materials in your packet relative to kind of the history of Domtar and a very large project they have in the works. Have had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Fawcett a couple of times with some of his members of his team. What they're looking for, as Mr. Fawcett will explain, is really it's a large project, and they're looking to leverage state, local, and even federal support to make that project happen. I'll bottom line up front from the county, apart from what the ask is, I believe, from Mr. Fawcett here today, from the representatives of the county board, is ultimately a resolution, both an expression of support from this committee of the project, but also ultimately from the county board. He'll talk through the timelines on one of the avenues they're looking to potentially leverage to make the project happen, and that's congressionally directed spending, working through Senator Baldwin's office, and that timeline is pretty short. It's the 7th of this month, so that's the expression of support I think he's seeking from this committee, an expression of support ultimately from the county board later this month. If you were to move both of those things forward, I think from Mr. Fawcett's perspective would be helpful. But then the other piece that staff are looking at, based on my conversations with Mr. Fawcett, is better understanding what opportunities, if any, exist for the county to provide support other than just expressions of support from the elected officials. And we would, of course, bring those options, if there are any, back to this committee and the full board for you to consider if those options are available. So we've had a couple of conversations about that. I'm just letting you know that's what staff is looking for, so that should you want to have that conversation, you actually have some information, some valuable information to do that. But today, Mr. Fawcett is going to explain to you again a little bit of history about Domtar and some of the issues, current issues with the Rothschild Dam and their proposed project that is hoping to move forward here shortly. So with that, I'll introduce Mr. Fawcett from Domtar, and you can take the mic and scroll through your presentation.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. So thank you for the opportunity to present here today. Interesting opportunity here in our region, and especially for the Domtar Pulp and Paper Mill in Rothschild. So a little bit of background about me. I'm the general manager of the plant. I have been with that facility for 30 years. So I've been with this project and really with the company for a long time. Definitely something I'm pretty passionate about. Interesting situation here with the age of the facility being 100+ years old. That dam has been, a mainstay there for all that time, and once upon a time provided much more value to the business, the pulp and paper manufacturing, than what it does today. We used to bring logs down the Wisconsin River. That was a primary method of transportation into the mill. Now everything is truck and rail. And then hydro generation was the other part of that, which in today's world, the actual hydro generation is really nominal. The dam as it stands today doesn't provide the mill a whole lot of value. In fact, a lot of times it ends up being just a distraction to remaining competitive in the paper industry, and something that's just more of an obligation. Now, Domtar is the licensee. It's licensed through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so we're permitted to operate and maintain the facility, and that's what we're going to do. I can take you through the presentation here a little bit, but a lot of this, about 3 years ago, every 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, there's a federal regulatory inspection, safety inspection of the facility, so a third-party audit or inspection. 3 years ago is when the federal inspector said on the wooden section of that dam, there's enough concern where it's time we start looking at doing something with it. So that really started the clock. We've been looking at engineered options and solutions for all of that time since then, even up to and including removing the dam. Quite honestly, when you look at the cost of all the options, that was certainly one of the things we explored as compared to fixing, maintaining, replacing. So we are, the engineering is complete. We've worked with several different agencies, the FERC, DNR, and an independent board of dam consultants across the U.S. and Canada to really come up with the design that we have to replace this timber crib spillway section of the dam. And that's what we'll talk through here today, but that's essentially the ask, is we're at a crossroads with that dam. Domtar, the cost of the project is $84 million, and that is to repair a third of the dam. So we're on a path to start that construction this summer, but we're looking for some additional support. Really, the truth is it provides as much or more value to the community today than it does to Domtar. But with that said, Domtar understands we're still the license holder and obligated to do something with that. But we've proposed a cost-sharing solution, and that's really what I'm here to kind of talk about. And we've been working this at the federal level, working with Senator Baldwin, Tom Tiffany, who else am I missing? Yeah, all of our representatives in Washington, and certainly with the climate there, really tough to identify any funding for any certainty. Senator Baldwin's office has put us on a path for a congressionally directed spending application, which we're in the process of doing, and looking for your support as a letter of support with that application. The Village of Rothschild is going to submit that on our behalf, and after I leave this meeting tonight, I'm heading right back to that board meeting to get their final approval to submit that. But that's the local support that we're really looking for, is that kind of support. And one of the big reasons, the $84 million, we were looking really at our owner proposed a third. Domtar would pay $28 million. We'd look for a third federal and a third state and a third federal funding support. But the federal, the federal options have really been limited. So we've really asked the state for $56 million to help with this for the state of Wisconsin and really this area. And really there's been a lot of interest. There's a lot of support at the state level. We're cautiously optimistic we'll get a good chunk of that. But a big part of that feedback from the state was we really need to see more local support to help justify us jumping in to help. So that's what I'm trying to do with the city, with the county, with the villages, is to really get the message out and see what we can do. So, but a big part of that is this application that we just found out about 3 weeks ago, and now that it's due on next Monday, I believe, really trying to kind of quickly get some letters of support to go in with that application to really bolster our case with Senator Baldwin's office. So that was kind of the quick version. I can kind of scroll through this, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. And if you have questions, by all means. But the presentation here is about 8 pages. We're calling it a community asset for North Central Wisconsin, really the pulp and paper industry. In Domtar in Wisconsin, we've got the mill in Rothschild and the mill in Nakusa. Combined, we're about 750 jobs. But indirectly, we affect about 3,500 jobs throughout the state, and really about $1 billion economic impact to the region. The wood sourcing, for example, we procure wood from 57 of our 72 counties. So our footprint is pretty far and wide in our state, and Wisconsin is the #1 paper-making state. And our challenge, especially in a declining paper industry, is to continue to protect and foster that. And for my owner, the owner of Domtar, to put $84 million into the dam, instead of remaining competitive with paper and pulp manufacturing is really kind of the crossroads I'm at, and trying to extend the runway on this. The mill is extremely successful and competitive, but it's old and it needs some infrastructure and some technology to continue to remain competitive. So this is a little bit about the Nekoosa and the Rothschild mill. Both well over 100 years old. I mentioned the impact and the number of employees. When I mentioned the early days, the early operations and the hydro generation, but really today it's become more of a quality of life. The Lake Wausau region, the public safety and flood control, and over this last weekend was another really good event. Most probably don't know. A lot of people on the Rib and Eau Claire probably saw more of it, but a really significant event in a short amount of time. And this dam is a key player in maintaining and managing flood control throughout the region. And right now it's leaking, and it's sheet piled to bedrock. It's not going anywhere. But if we don't start something now to get it taken care of, that's the challenge. So really provides more benefit to the community with all the ways I've explained. The challenge is, and it's not that we haven't been trying to keep it up to standard. The problem with this dam, it's about 800 feet wide. 2/3 of it is concrete and is in very good shape. The other part is a timber crib spillway, and the best way for me to explain that is like Lincoln Logs. It's all kind of interconnected, and you can't really isolate a section to repair it. It's kind of an all or nothing type repair. I'd say we've averaged $1 million a year in trying to repair this thing over the last 15 years. And it's really just at the point, it was replaced in 1964, and really it's at the time where it needs to be replaced again. So the commitment, from my owner, the project is $84 million. It's expected to take about 3 to 4 years to complete. And we're looking for a cost-sharing type approach and solution across all the state and federal levels. So we're proposing a 1/3 cost-sharing approach. The benefits of fixing the dam, and we've talked about these. And this is, I think, is the good part. What my owner is saying is, if we can secure this funding support, his commitment is to continue to invest $100 million into the Rothschild and Nekoosa mills over the next 3 years into pulp and paper manufacturing. So for me, that's kind of the, what's in it for us is we help protect the, the jobs and the, the vitality of the business in the region, let alone the benefits of the dam and the infrastructure there. So I think it's a reasonable approach and a reasonable ask. And if we can get some help fixing the dam, then we can help extend the runway of the paper manufacturing. So there is a website that's live now, and this is the link to it. There's a lot of updates already on there. There's a frequently asked questions page on there. Honestly, as we've been going around kind of doing these presentations, any of the questions we have quickly kind of answered them and filtered them right back into the FAQ page. So if there's any questions, that's a great resource to use. Been working with the Chamber of Commerce, the city, the Village of Rothschild, Rib Mountain, the Lake Association. A lot of the different groups have seen a lot of this already. So, really kind of here's a little bit of detail. I didn't really get into this, but when I mentioned the dam, the picture on the left is really kind of the dam from left to right, if you will. It's easier to kind of visualize it, but the mill is on that side, the dam goes across the river, this is the west side, but this is the section that is compromised, and really the project is to build a coffer dam around it, to isolate it, dewater it, demolish it, and put in a new concrete structure with 2 new flow control gates, which would really essentially completely modernize the asset and secure it for The other concrete section is 100 years old and in great shape. This should last for a long, long time. This is what we're replacing. I like this picture because this is.
Hey, Dave,
Yeah.
can you, just so they can hear you online?
Yep, sorry.
No worries.
So this is the structure. I mean, when I mentioned the Lincoln log structure, this helps kind of articulate what that looks like. And this is what is there today and what will be demolished. But it shows you the amount of wood that's above and below water that after, 40 years is now at the stage where it needs to be removed and replaced. And they replaced it with wood in 1964. I wish they would have replaced it in concrete and I wouldn't be here today. But that was before my time. So here we are, but hopefully that helps to articulate that. So really my ask, from the county and Administrator Leonard has been super helpful in helping guide where we can go with this is a letter of support to go with our application, the congressionally directed spending application through Senator Baldwin's office to show that, we've got the county's support for that application. It's it's good for the area, it's good for the region, it's good for Domtar, and it's the right thing to do. And hopefully we can get your support to do that. Any questions? I know I went through that rather quickly. Yeah.
What are your obligations or interactions with Wisconsin Valley Improvement? Is it still Wisconsin Valley
Yep,
Improvement?
yep.
Okay.
Actively involved. We're a board member of the WVIC. This last weekend, for example, managing the reservoir from Tomahawk to, Wisconsin Dells. I mean, it's managing the river flows through the system. So we're working with WVIC on this. They've been in a lot of the design discussions, the flood control. So they're not they don't provide funding or they're
No,
not,
I understand.
we work with those folks daily.
What happens if that dam isn't there for flood control?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Well, I mean,
besides the aesthetic pieces.
yeah, I mean, if you look at the flood control between the Wausau, dam hydro and right in downtown, you got the Eau Claire, and the Rib and the main Wisconsin coming down. So it kind of manages that and then the downstream flow control to the Mosinee Dam and down to Dubé. So it's, what we do is watch the flows at each one of those dams and try to equalize it out so one area isn't taking more flooding or more. So it is a really integrated flood control system, and I don't know that most folks know that.
Wisconsin Rapids lost Mead or Verso, I guess. Who runs the dam and is responsible for it there now?
It was I think a spinoff of that group that still has the hydro rights. The Domtar Mill in Nakusa owns and operates 3 hydros down there, much bigger than what we have in Rothschild. This dam is rated, the hydro capacity is rated at 3.5 megawatts, for example. The mill uses 17 megawatts of electricity a day, just to kind of put it in perspective. The Nakusa Dam generates over 20 megawatts. So the hydro generating capacity of that dam is significantly different. We're called a low head dam. There's only 19 feet of elevation difference, and there's just not a lot of potential for energy there.
Are the generators newer, older?
There's 7 generators at the Rothschild hydro. They're all small and relatively old. They're all 1920s, 1950s vintage in that range. Ellis Chalmers, actually. They are running. They're just not reliable. The bigger component, though, is it's a run-of-the-river license through FERC. And what that means is Lake Wausau, we have to manage the lake elevation plus or minus 3 inches or so. A lot of the dams are allowed to back up water, say overnight, and then allow it to go through during the day to take advantage of that generation. We can't do that. Whatever water's coming into us, we have to pass, so we can't peak the operation. And a lot of times, there's lost opportunities there, so to speak.
But you would never put in newer generators. I mean, that isn't fiscally,
That's an opportunity. That's one of the things, I mean, the bigger thing is the liability with the structure, and that's what we're working on now. We do have Focus on Energy grant incentives to optimize a couple of the hydro generators. We're running, as we stand here today, we're running 2 or 3 of them and generating about 2 megawatts. So we are running them, but there's just not, there's a limited amount of capacity. And honestly, with the availability of electricity, oftentimes, if I've got limited amount of capital, we're going to put it into pulp and paper manufacturing than to maintain these 100-year-old generators. It's just cheaper to buy the electricity, unfortunately.
I hear you. I've been in the WPS dams and some of those bearings are leather.
Yeah, we just replaced wooden bearings on 2 of the generators.
Well, I'm just saying fiscally, if you generate more.
Yep.
It's worth more, but you may not pay to put the capital in it.
Right. There is some efficiency upgrade opportunity. We can probably get 20% more generation with new units based on the amount of total energy that's there. And that's what we would be looking at as a project within Domtar outside of this structure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Yeah.
So I've been following this project for quite a while now, and after you kind of get over that sticker shock of how much improvements are going to cost, just the overall impact to our region in terms of outdoor recreation, flood control, property values, jobs. It's unfortunate that, there has to be this big of an expenditure, but I don't really see any other option. So with that, I'll make a motion that the county provide a letter of support for the project.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Okay, any further discussion? Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Chair. So can you tell me a little bit about Domtar, the parent company? And you said you're willing to do a 3-year commitment. What is happening at year 4? I see on the website, it says Domtar's open to transferring ownership of the dam to an entity that can use the resource to serve the public, which makes me wonder what your long-term vision is for Domtar keeping the Rothschild Dam open.
Well, keeping the dam open, we're obligated to do that. Honestly, I would say the last 5 or 6 years, we have tried to sell it to somebody who focuses on hydro generation. That's not our core business anymore. So we don't have the expertise. And so if there were a company that was interested in taking it over or running it, and so that could be an option that we would be open to down the road. But certainly nobody's going to take it in the condition it's in. So either way, this has to be done. From the Domtar perspective, our corporate headquarters is in Charlotte, just south of Charlotte, North Carolina, in South Carolina there. We've got Domtar has about 12 pulp and paper facilities throughout the U.S. We've recently become a bigger part of the Paper Excellence family, which has about 65 facilities across the U.S. And so pretty good size company. But we've got each of the pulp and paper mills are a little bit specialized. At the Rothschild mill, our paper machine makes paper that none of the other assets can make. A lot of them have tried and failed, and that's been the key to success at Rothschild is the capability of the paper machine, and the pulp that we make there is unique and different than any other mill. So, we make the premium product of all the Domtar paper assets, which is pretty unique in today's world. We're probably the oldest and slowest machine, but we're still the best. So that's key. That's key. What happens after 3 years? I don't know that anybody can predict in the paper industry. It's been a tough business, but even for me, to get a 3-year commitment out of the owner is better than anything I've seen so far. So I'm honestly pretty excited about that. My team is excited about that. So that's a big commitment from our owner.
And to be clear, it is a U.S. company then?
Yes.
Not Canada?
Correct.
Okay, so I keep thinking of the Ward Paper Mill about 20 years ago up in Merrill that they just stopped maintaining and eventually it needed to be gone. Could that, I just feel like this is a hair on fire moment.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to panic, but I'm a panicker.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, I mean, if you can't get this money because there's so much uncertainty at both the state and federal level, and I don't know what kind of local commitment that,
Yeah.
would be made, what happens if you can't secure this 2/3 funding?
I agree. I worry about that every night. Without the capital, and I'm competing with the rest of the Domtar mills, the fleet, for that limited capital we do have. And it's a competitive market. So it's a good question. You look at some of the other mills around the Park Falls, the Brokaw, but I would say our mill is unique in a couple different perspectives. We've got that biomass plant on site, a Beauregard plant. We've got 3 businesses operating on the same campus. So it definitely is a reduced, and it's a cost sharing, a lower cost of operation. There's a number of things that set that site apart that I think, we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to be in good shape, but the industry is declining. There's no doubt paper consumption, paper demand is declining. I think what we're trying to do is extend that runway as long as we can.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ready?
Madam Chair, can I clarify my understanding of the motion based on my conversations with Mr. Fawcett? So in light of the timing, because the congressionally directed spending application is due to be submitted, they are required to be submitted by April 7th, is my understanding. And of course, the county board is not going to meet by the 7th. However, to ensure that Domtar has the opportunity, should this body and the full board think it appropriate to have a letter both from this body and the full board, my understanding of the motion and the second is to authorize a letter be drafted by this committee referencing its support for the project, but also have a concurring request for this matter to be forwarded to the full board for its consideration.
Exactly.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. Is a second also?
How do you, that has to be signed by somebody, doesn't it?
Correct. In speaking with Corp Counsel, we could have the letter of support from this committee be signed by the chair of the committee, but it would be a letter specifically referencing that this is an expression of support by this committee as opposed to the full board, because of course, under your rules, you can't speak for the full board, but at the same time, forward it to the full board for consideration to author a different letter expressing support of the entire Board of Supervisors if that were to be successful. Did I
So
correctly
does your
state
second
that,
stand?
Mr. Corp Counsel?
Yes.
Question, Supervisor Lemmer.
So we're going to say yes to a letter we haven't seen? I mean, I feel a little uncomfortable with that. Is the letter draft somewhere where we could look at it?
No, there's no letter. It would be a letter of expression of support for the Domtar, as Mr. Fawcett laid out, the Domtar application for congressionally directed spending that, based on the information you received, you believe the project is valuable and should be considered for congressionally directed spending.
Just so we're all clear, we're not committing any funding to anything here. We're just simply saying that we're in support of what Domtar is doing, the importance of the mill and everything, kind of what's been laid out. So we're not looking at any spending as part of this,
That's correct.
taking at least from county coffers.
Vice Chair
correct.
Dickinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is there any potential conflict if this committee offers a letter of support, but the full county board does not? Do we run into a situation of, kind of conflicting approval and non-approval or support?
I'll give you, my short answer is, yes, there would certainly be a conflict. You'd have one committee that took an action that the full board ultimately didn't take action to support. I don't know if it creates any, in my mind, there's not a legal issue. As a practical matter, I would perhaps foresee that the application for congressionally directed spending would not be as strong, but that's just off the top of my head, Mr. Vice Chair. I don't know, Corp Counsel, if you have a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a committee doesn't have the authority to bind the county to anything, so if the county board took up the issue and elected to not approve such a letter, Marathon County wouldn't be behind that support as a governing body. So I think there is some potential for inherent conflict there. I just think that's the nature of having a committee speak to something without the board speaking to something, for sure.
Further thoughts? Supervisor Lemmer?
So have you been educating, say, the Lake Wassa Association and other things like that, that they know that this is, I'm going to call it a hair on fire moment, because if I lived on the lake and had my house similar to what happened up in Merrill, I would be worried. So what kinds of communication have you done with the area that would be impacted? And I'm sure it's more than just Lake Wassa, but.
Yeah, in December, we had all of the local community leads into the mill, and we did a presentation similar to this of, this is what we have going on, this is what it, and honestly, at that time, there was a strong potential for an extended drawdown to complete the project, which would have been, to use your expression, a bigger hair on fire moment. We're able to, with a lot of cost and a lot of extra engineering, we're able to avoid that. So during the length of the project, the construction, we're not going to have to at least do that. So during the construction, it should be okay, but I think folks are aware that there's a need to maintain that dam to protect the integrity of that reservoir.
Supervisor Rosenberg?
What's the difference in, you may not have an answer, what's the difference in cost between putting the cofferdams in and just drawing it down and doing the work that way?
The cost to avoid the drawdown is between 5 and 10. The extra effort, cost, and design in the cofferdam is between 5 and 10 million. I don't have the exact number, but it's extensive. And the big reason for that is during the construction, when the cofferdam is in place, a third of our ability to release water, pass water, will be out of service. So in a high flow event, we then had to be worried about flooding upstream. So we have flash boards and temporary structures that in a high flow event, we will flood the construction zone to protect upstream housing from flooding outside of normal. It's just, there's a lot, in my time there, we have gone to great lengths to avoid drawdowns just due to the impact to the community. Most other facilities do regular drawdowns for maintenance, knowing the impact it has in the community. I lived in Rib Mountain for 25 years. I'm well aware of the impact in the community. I mean, it's just something, as a good neighbor, I've tried to avoid bringing on. So we've done underwater repairs. We've done a lot of that stuff. This is just of such a magnitude, but we're able to avoid the drawdown and still manage all the other concerns and issues, but at an increased cost. But it's the cofferdam that I had there. That cofferdam is roughly a quarter of the cost of the project. So it's a temporary structure that'll be gone when this is over, but it's $20 million for a temporary structure. You know, so it's just, it is, I mean, somebody mentioned the extreme cost. I mean, it is a costly project.
I'm not suggesting you do it, I just wondered what it was going to cost.
Yeah, no, in a number of the conversations we've had, that the feedback when we had the meeting in December, that was the top concern, is how much of a drawdown is it going to be and how much is it going to affect my house, me. And we were fully anticipating that and already trying to, design ways around that.
So shall we proceed to vote? We are voting on the motion to submit a letter to support this and then also take this to the full board for a separate letter. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
So does that encompass B as well, since we, okay, all right, then we're on to 7. Educational presentation and committee discussion, A, update from the Marathon County Historical Society on 2024 service delivery. Come on up. Thank you.
You have Blake and Russ from the Historical Society here to give you an update as is required under our performance contract. So take it away, gentlemen. You're all queued up. You can scroll.
All right. Well, thanks, Lance, for introducing us. So I am the new executive director over at the Marathon County Historical Society, just finishing up actually my first full year around the sun with the organization, so my first year. So very, very excited to do this presentation with you guys, as I've been able to personally have hands-on experience with the organization throughout this last year. So to kick things off, this is just a lot of updates as far as our fulfillment on the contract that we have signed with the county, and then a little bit more for you. So a little bit overview as far as the presentation. We'll go into some background information, go into our funding. I like to be very transparent with our funding and where those sources are. Look around the county and our impact and how we work with our county partners. Touch on tourism, the services we provide, and then finally the impact of all the work we do. And then Russ will take a little glimpse into the future for us. So just as a review here, our mission statement. So we exist to collect, preserve, and exhibit materials related to the history of Marathon County and to use those materials to help people learn about North Central Wisconsin, connect with their roots, and explore their own historical connections. And I do want to point out, we are the only organization that our sole focus is on the history of Marathon County. There are other history organizations we work with, but they focus on their local communities. We are the only one in existence that focuses on the entire county's history. A little bit about our history here. So we were founded in 1952 by a group of community members that felt we were losing the connection to our history. In 1954, that's when we were gifted the beautiful Yawkey House that everyone knows us for. And it wasn't until 1995 that we purchased the Woodson History Center and were able to move into that building and expand our operations. Now, 30 years later, we have completely filled up that space, and we're looking we'll talk about that later on at the end of the presentation, but we got some plans coming up here. So a little bit of a funding breakdown here. As you can see, the majority of our funds, in the past, we really siloed this as far as in which area there was impact as far as education, economic impact. This is more of like a holistic, 100% comprehensive of our funding and how that's broken down. A lot of that you'll see in the majority, over 50% comes from our investment funds. And then we do have a great contribution from donations, and then followed up by the support by Marathon County as our third largest funding source. We are trying to diversify more, looking more into ways we can grow our membership and our sponsorships, as well as some grant opportunities as well. So taking a look around the county here, so that is part of our contract. So we do provide programs to the library system. Over this last year in 2024, we had 29 programs with over 2,700 attendees and views. So that's both our virtual and in-person programming there. As far as a breakdown as our visitors to the Woodson History Center and to the Yawkey House, we had 7,575 visitors from around the county. Now, the next slide here is a further breakdown as far as state and national-wide visitors, but countywide, this is how many visitors came here to specifically the Historical Society over the last year, and then a little breakdown there as far as what communities those folks came from.
And I would just point out these two pie graphs exclude the visitors from the city of Wausau. So when we say around the county, that means outside of Wausau. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just make sure they can see all of
Oh, didn't know I was getting clipped off.
the, yeah.
Thank you.
My bad.
So the other big program we have for the county is the Little Red Schoolhouse program. I'm sure if many of you haven't been through the program, your kids have been through the program, you've been around the area. I always like to say that plants the seeds for historians to bud into. So we had over 1,300 fourth graders come through last year into that program. Very, very happy with the partnership we have with the Marathon County Parks Department. We were able to work with them and the city of Wausau to walk them through having that designated as a local historic landmark. I believe that is either going to Common Council or already has gone through Common Council here to be approved. But shows the impact that we're having outside of the city of Wausau as far as what other communities are coming in to utilize those services. And furthermore, it's all about partnerships and collaborations. And one area that we've been really focusing on this year is how can we work better with our partners, those other historical groups and organizations within the county, to better create opportunities, but how we can better cross-promote each other's offerings. So a little list there of the other historic organizations within the Marathon County here. We do have other 9 history organizations. And we have started off a new initiative of hosting quarterly roundtables, and that is hosted at the Woodson History Center here in Wausau. So we are able to bring all these people to the table, have open discussions, share best practices, and just really kind of rising tides, we can all grow and learn from each other. The same group is also working together to see what we can get planned for America's 250th. I'll hit on that towards the end here, but next year, 2026, is America's 250th anniversary. And it is our county's 175th this year. Oh, and before I go over to this one too, in addition to these 9 entities, we are also working with more of our regional partners as well, and that includes Portage County Historical Society in Merrill, and then of course our folks over at Northwood County as well, seeing how we can work together as a region, as a historic destination. And speaking about tourism there, these are our updated rankings. In the past, we included just TripAdvisor. So this year, we are number 2 for the Yawkey House Museum. As far as a tourist destination, number 5 is the Woodson History Center, followed by us as the Historical Society operating out of the Woodson History Center. New this year, I included the stats for Google. So we are number 3 ranked as the Yawkey House Museum and number 4 as the Marathon County Historical Society. So we are one of the top tourism destinations here in central Wisconsin in Marathon County. So as I mentioned, we take great pride that we are the sole organization dedicated to preserving and educating folks on our county's history. Now, I gave that number before of just county visitors coming to our location. As you see here, a breakdown, it's pretty close as far as a third mix, but 68% of our visitors who are coming to our location are actually outside of Marathon County, and 37% of that is outside of our state. And in fact, so again, further strengthening that concept that we are a tourist destination for central Wisconsin. Some of our services here, I won't go into too many details, just keep kind of things concise and brief, be respectful of your time. But we do a series of community events. We're constantly capturing oral histories, historic tours. We go out and do community outreach with our traveling trunk presentations, other group and community group presentations. We do traveling exhibits, virtual programming. One thing I want to point on here is that we also do our historic research services, so we do have that available. And this year, well, actually on the next slide we'll have the update there, but we do have a digital archive on our website with over 26,000 archives for our community to access 100% free. And then getting more into that impact there. So over this 2024, we served over 21,000 people directly, over 24,000 people virtually. Of those, over 3,200 children served. Little Red Schoolhouse numbers there for you. So as I mentioned that previous slide, just over 1,300 students passed through the Little Red Schoolhouse over the course of 28 different field trips or field visits, if you will. We offered 106 free programs and events throughout the course of that year. 29 in-person and virtual programs for the public libraries, and 3 free exhibits. So of those 3 exhibits, just want to mention, since we did just recently complete the second half of the 1920s exhibit, we have the Our Stories, which is our semi-permanent exhibit, talking about the history of Marathon County. We had our first half of the 1920s exhibit, which is in our upper floor, talking about more like the business and cultural history during the 1920s in this area. And then we just opened up Ainshee Suite, which complements the 1920s exhibit upstairs that talks about the women in the 1920s in this county, which is pretty spectacular because we have actual clothing from the women that lived here in the 1920s. If you haven't been there, check it out. I'm a little biased, but do check it out. And then as far as our impact, this year alone, we have digitized over 12,000 documents, and those are part of the searchable database on our website. We have a new resource and tool, which is very exciting. We call it the Obsolete Media Center. So we're able to start digitizing all these very vulnerable assets, including 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter films from the 1920s that really we haven't been able to see for years because you get a little bit nervous to run those films. So now we have about 50% of that collection digitized, which equates to 33.2 hours of media that we have been able to preserve for future generations. If you've been to some of our recent events, we've been showcasing it a little bit, everything from, Everest's home videos to winter frolics, ice skating in the 1930s and 40s. And it really kind of puts a human touch on the history of people that lived here.
If I could jump in, if any of you remember 8-track players, if you're of a certain age, I think we're still looking for an 8-track player. So anybody's got one, we're in the market for it.
That's the missing gap right now. So in total now, that brings our total searchable archives up to 37,000 with those new numbers added in the mix there. And actually talking about the DC Everest family there, that's actually in the slideshow, that's a little clip from that footage that we were able to save. So that's Mrs. Everest, who we don't actually have a lot of information on, but she was definitely a very interesting person. She has a little dance in the home videos, very excited to get in her new car. So I always like to say this quote, especially when it comes to partnerships and collaborations. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. Helen Keller. I really use that as a guiding force when it comes time for partnerships and collaborations, which dovetails into the next slide. Over this year, these are all the organizations we have worked with. Just to name the ones that came to the top of my mind, I'm sure if I had a laundry list, we could fill up another few slides here. But we do want to get out and collaborate and partner with as many entities as possible, as history is a very common thread that can be weaved through any organization. And we love to provide those research opportunities, but also find ways that we can amplify our impact as an organization as well. Which brings us into almost the end of our presentation here. So as we take a look into the future, Russ, I may have you take it away with the John and Caroline Sonntag Legacy Center.
Sure, thank you, Blake. And just looking at this magnificent vehicle that Mrs. Everest is getting into, I just remind you that DC Everest was recruited and brought to this area to be the manager of the pulp and paper mill and hydroelectric plant in Rothschild. Into the future, last year, you guys scheduled a tour with us, and we talked about our facility and the fact that in 2022, we had acquired the single operator telephone switchboard from the Mosinee Telephone Company, and that was the last artifact of any significant size that we could take because we are flat out of space. If things go as planned and expected and everything falls into place, we expect to begin construction on our preservation facility. The John and Caroline Sonntag Legacy Center will be a 39,000 square foot facility that will house our archives and our artifacts to allow us to renovate the Woodson History center for our research library and our exhibits and other amenities. Blake is getting us all ready for the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. And Blake has us on a long-term project, a very valuable project to get us ultimately certified at the gold level for the American Association of State and Local Historical Societies. If we can achieve that, and it is an ambitious goal, it's an ambitious project, we will really be on the map nationally on that. So we're hoping for that. And let me just echo what Blake said. If you haven't seen our two new exhibits, the 1920s Rebellion, Prosperity, and Loss, it is fascinating. One of the sections in that is just on prohibition alone in Marathon County. How many of you think that prohibition was a popular idea in Marathon? Right, it was not popular, but that's a terrific exhibit. And then Ain't She Sweet, Women in the 1920s, that is terrific. It's full of glamour. I mean, the dresses are glamorous, they really are. So please be sure and come visit us if you have.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for allowing us the opportunity. Is there any questions that you guys have for us while we have you? All right. Excellent. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay, so B, child caring update. I don't see Kelly here, so we will move on to C. So we had discussed, Administrator Leonard and I, something that he learned at a conference, and he thought maybe it would be interesting if we would learn more about it, and I said yes, so that's what this is about, and I will turn it over to the Assistant Administrator, Chris Holman.
Vice
Thank
is
you.
okay.
Vice. I have lots of vices.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair. Administrator Leonard asked me to put together a brief overview of worker relocation programs. In my previous role in Portage County, I was involved in discussions around this for a lot of the same reasons you've seen likely in the Ford Analytics data, highlighting sort of this demographic trends in the state. And so I think, what we'll see and kind of talk through briefly here is really not just a local or a state challenge, but when you really dig into it, it becomes a regional, and then in some ways, depending on the industry, a national challenge in terms of competing for those individual workers in key industries. So Wisconsin Policy Forum did put together an article on this, kind of emphasizing that historically there is a lot of public dollar investment in giving businesses money to create jobs, but then that's shifted from saying, hey, business X, go create jobs, to we know we have key industries here, so we could say, look at the medical industry in our neighborhood. We need these key players in that industry to exist, so we're going to come up with a strategy to attract those individuals and bring them here and, provide an incentive for them to do so as a way to outcompete, either within the state or regionally for that expertise coming in. And it's not just medical industry, you could say the same thing for transport and truck drivers, CDL drivers. There's a drastic need for people in that field as well. So it really does range across the economy. So the individual incentives are often tethered to people who can kind of work anywhere. So we've heard of trends of people moving from cities to northern Wisconsin, and then they can have a house wherever they want to settle, and then they can work in San Francisco or Texas or wherever. But that also is more, the flip side of that is what I was mentioning earlier, is that rather than having someone come here to buy a house and work somewhere else, you get them to come here, work locally in those key industries, and provide the same sort of secondary and tertiary benefits in terms of maybe they have a family, so their kids go to your schools, they shop locally, those kinds of things. And, same thing for property tax base and so on and so forth. according to them, Wisconsin's been a little bit slower to adopt these types of programs among its Midwestern peers. They provided a map to kind of show you where a lot of them are. So you see a lot of them kind of hanging out over in Indiana and Illinois area and over towards Iowa. And we do have a couple here in the state, which I'll touch on briefly. The Wisconsin-based programs, the one that gets talked about a lot is in Fond du Lac. And, it's multiple stakeholders are involved. It's a county-wide effort, and any business is eligible. So they're saying, we know there's needs across the county. This program that they've created doesn't require you to be in a particular industry. But the big thing is, why are they doing it? And it gets back to that demographic data. So for them, in 10 years, a quarter of their population is going to be transitioning in retirement. So they're looking at the workforce going like, okay, who's going to backfill a lot of these positions? The program is a reimbursement. The business fronts all the costs, but then if the person comes and works locally and stays there for 12 months, then the business applies for a 50% reimbursement. How is it funded? So their funding mechanism is a combination of funds from the local chamber, from their equivalent of McDevco as well, the county via sales tax funding, and also their revolving loan fund, that RLF, that's what that is. So then the business can apply for the reimbursements. As I noted, the employer funds it all up front. So then their applicant has to actually meet all the criteria before they can be reimbursed. And they also made a note that they can pay it in installments. Another one in Wisconsin, or the second one really in Wisconsin, is in Sheboygan County. Similar reasons in terms of why they're trying to create these programs to attract people. Their programs focus primarily on entry-level positions, and a lot of them you'll see there, it's like they want candidates moving from at least 75 miles away. When you go into, when you look it up or Google these things or follow some of the links embedded in this presentation, there's a roughly 30 to 40 programs across the country, and they all have kind of varying degrees of how far away they're expecting people to move to qualify. But for them, it's relatively close, and they provide some relocation reimbursement, a little help with gas and groceries, but then they've got that 90 days of dorm-style housing at no cost. And I know we've kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of maybe finding, talking about tax deed parcels and things like that. Like maybe there's a house where if you had somebody coming in and part of the challenge is finding a house to buy, then you could provide that housing on a short-term basis while they figure that out, and then they start work with you. So they've connected the program with over 60 companies in their county that are actively hiring, and they reference having at least 3,000 open jobs. Other states examples, Tulsa Remote is probably the most talked about nationally. They're wanting that first example of people who are untethered to a specific location. So you work remotely, you can live anywhere, come move to Tulsa, we'll give you $10,000. And so far they've got 400 workers they've attracted and tallied that up to be an economic impact of $62 million. Then in Greater Rochester, it's a very similar program in terms of $10,000 in relocation reimbursements and $9,000 to help somebody buy a house. Northwest Arkansas, this one, obviously Walton Family Foundation nearby helps out, so their starting budget was of $1 million is a good nest egg to work with. But again, it's for remote workers moving there to then, it looks like, to do a combination of two things, either work elsewhere, but also build that pipeline for thousands of jobs in the STEAM topic areas. This one also adds a bike. And I thought that was kind of unique. And, aside from, how far away did you move? I think the reason that I wanted to kind of touch on that is that it really becomes, you can create what you want. So if you had something that was specific to your region, you could kind of fold that in as like a unique twist to your program. And you do see that kind of built into how these local entities and counties, cities, and otherwise have tried to build their incentive program. Like, hey, let's provide these funds to help them get here, and then let's help them kind of like get acquainted with the local area. I think even in this particular example, they said if people don't want the bike, they will buy them memberships in like local groups, like art, history groups, museums, things like that, to get them a step into the community and in areas that they're interested in. Yeah.
So the thing, like Chris just alluded to, that idea of cultural integration into the community, the reason the bicycle is there, if you don't know, Bentonville, Arkansas is a giant mountain biking capital of, I mean, really, it's the destination. If you see people driving around, the bikes on the back of the car cost more than the car. So it's very, very, it's a part of their community that they can market. And I'll be candid, I had conversations with the chamber locally about this idea a couple of years ago, and the conversation was, hey, the thing we have that separates us from our surrounding area is Granite Peak. You know, you can, that same sort of idea, what Bentonville has is a very, very robust mountain biking community and trail system. So finding ways, like Chris said, if whether it's cultural, if it's museums, if it's the art community or outdoor recreation, areas are leveraging those things through these programs.
Lastly, in terms of examples, and this is one that I was involved in directly, was the Wisconsin Counties Association worked with a group called Competitive Wisconsin, and they've got a number of different efforts they were working on, but this area was one big one. Big picture, you know, they brought in a lot of private sector players and public sector players, and not small potatoes private sector either. You know, you had the Deloittes of the world in the room, you had major manufacturers in the room. They were all talking about the sort of the struggles in terms of workforce attraction. How do you keep people? How do we attract? And their goal in that effort was to see even if you could collaborate with the state even to create sort of a statewide fund. The communities could say, we want to tap this for these key industries, doing the same kind of thing that these other programs are doing, but have like a sizable enough investment that you could actually have the program live off of a accrued interest kind of thing, you know, in a hypothetical situation. But I mean, you had multiple counties, cities. It was an impressive group of people, very good discussions, but they really were highlighting for themselves and their own entities, but also the communities they were in. Like, this is like the struggle that's underlying it all. And I think this gets back to the Counties Association and Forward Analytics. I mean, they've done a really good job in the last year or so of really highlighting how stark the trends are in terms of demographics and kind of posing that question in terms of like, what are people going to do? And, you know, you often hear about, you know, there are going to be winners and losers and things like that. And underpinning, you know, who's going to win and who's going to lose are conversations like this. Not necessarily that you have to have a worker relocation program, but what is your strategy if you're going to try to navigate the challenges that are being presented to you? So this is one way that they were trying to do it. It really was bigger than sort of a county effort. They wanted something more collaborative with the state. But nevertheless, if you go to that particular website, there's multiple videos of the topics, the presenters, the conversations they were having, panel discussions again, where you saw a lot of the similar issues between public and private sector and even across industries. It really kind of highlighted that even though there's a lot of differences played out around the people who were participating, they were all experiencing the same sorts of challenges. So in that sense, the conversations were pretty rich. Obviously, in terms of why are we talking about it and what's the idea and, you know, what are the potential benefits to Marathon County? You know, so if the county were ever to do something like this, it would immediately plug into those questions around workforce attraction, retention. We hear that a lot. You know, economic growth and community investment. I mean, that's tied back to supporting key industries or even back to tax-based schools, you know, shopping, all those things where, you know, these are the people that, you know, are the foundation for which everything else comes off of. Community branding and talent marketing, like Administrator Leonard was saying, like what's the sort of thing you want to highlight with your area to kind of put you know, to distinguish you from other people in this space, because it really is competitive. And then help answer those questions with the negative trends and shortages in the workforce now, but also looking ahead, because the challenges are already here, you know, we know that. But, you know, Dale at Forward Analytics, you know, he'll show you the graph and be like, uh-oh. So yeah, I mean, it really is a serious question. It's one that, you know, I think maybe 10 years ago, people saw coming, but nobody's really discussing. But that's why these things started to bubble to the surface is, you know, people are trying to figure out how do they wrap their heads around it. I'll also say that, you know, when I was participating in that effort, I was in a meeting with a major regional employer, and, COVID had something to do with the remote work kind of shift, but he was also saying, like, look, I compete nationwide with other people in this sector. We would try to go out, get these remote workers to work for us, and, it was pretty, he wouldn't say easy, but there was a solid pool. We go out, we get what we needed. And he said, even before COVID, it started to change, and then COVID accelerated to the point where he's like, now I've got dozens and dozens of people, and we're all competing for that same individual. So even though they are a major employer, large footprint nationwide, they were struggling with now having to compete with so many more people in that same space. So that all being said, I know that you two had discussions about this, but also if the committee has questions or comments, it's certainly something worth chewing on.
Any thoughts? Have you had any recent discussions with the chamber?
I haven't. Again, those conversations were probably a couple of years ago when the program in Fond du Lac was getting a lot of the press that Chris talked about. I'm not aware if any additional conversations have been had. Kim, sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know if you've heard anything about.
No.
Okay.
Not recently.
And I guess that's the point. It's not only questions, but what are next steps? I mean, if you want us to do some additional legwork on that, I certainly can look into and try to see if we have resources to do it. Just like anything, however, as you frequently talk about with what you want administration and staff to take on, putting one thing on the plate means I'm going to have to find something else to take off. But if you want me to come back and at least maybe do some initial inquiry and see if there is appetite, I'd be happy to do that.
I think a number of these different programs have been very successful. There's other ones that I don't think the money's been well spent. Excuse me, there's a component to it, I think you touched on in your presentation, is the integration into the community is the biggest piece. There's some people out there that you flash some money in front of them, they'll make that decision based on that. But I don't think it really ties them into being or to staying in a place. It was probably 7, 8 years ago now, the city of Wausau developed the Live It Up Wausau program, which is somewhat along these lines, which was a down payment assistance program where they got $10,000, had to pay that back with no interest. If they did successfully, the last year of the payment was waived. Pseudo program, but really hasn't been very successful in the last few years. Rising costs of housing, the $10,000 doesn't really go as far as it used to. I think there's value in this. I just don't know if it's a priority right now for the county to be working on. I know the administrator has plenty of things, both of you do. I think it's something that we can keep in mind. And if we see a model out there that we think that would work and be beneficial, look at allocating some money to that at budget time in future years.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will move on to D, strategic plan review and updates from Vice Chair Dickinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a little introduction here to kind of what we're going to do. So the current strategic plan was passed by the board in 2018. We had COVID, and so the revision and extension was completed in 23, with the outcome measures generally being extended through 2024. So this isn't a discussion on extending this current strategic plan, really just putting a bow on it as we work on the new comprehensive plan, which then will lead to a new strategic plan next year. So this is really for the committee to discuss with additional details shared by the administrator or department heads. And then from there, it would be, looking at those outcome measures and seeing that they've been met, which one of the things that it can trigger would be the next strategic plan, whether these would be outcome measures that would still want to be included, would some want to be removed. So that's kind of the basis for it. And the way the previous two committees have gone through it is just going through each objective and just going over those outcome measures, if there's any detail that needs to be included. So Administrator, do you want to step through as we've been doing, or do you want me to step through? How would you prefer?
We can rock, paper,
Rock,
scissors,
paper,
go back and
scissors.
forth. But I think the vice chair did a very nice job of kicking it off. If we start with the strategic plan and maybe highlight which specific objectives this committee was charged with, really the first one, as I see it, is a joint responsibility you had with the infrastructure committee, and that is relative to objective 8.7. And that is to strive to provide affordable, reliable, high-speed internet access throughout the county. And of course, the board has done, this is my characterization, but I think you've done a lot in that area. So with respect to those outcome measures, you'll see that the first outcome measure is develop and improve data inventory relative to internet service speeds available throughout the county. You'll have to bear with me as I try to bounce back and forth between our website, but one of the tasks that was given was to add some links through that inventory and conversations with the broadband task force. So you'll see if you go under projects and planning, there is the broadband high-speed internet link and all of the links below, which talk about things from affordability expansion efforts, but also a map of speed test results, resources and information, and service availability, which links you to the Public Service Commission. And it looks like one of the national broadband map is not working right now, but based on your, and I'll look into that after, but when you look at confirm your location, go to the map, seek to find service providers, that was one of those things that, from that outcome measure, to try to link people to the services that were available, because, and again, this is me characterizing some of the conversation at the Broadband Task Force, is that how do we make sure people are aware of who the potential providers are? So that was kind of that low barrier to entry effort to expand access. With respect to the next goal, which was by the end of 2023, ensure 85% of households have high-speed internet access. Now, the various measures on this, again, you can go to the Public Service Commission or the FCC to get information, but I just pulled to see if we've made movement, pulled information from the census, and the most recent census information that I was able to find that talks about broadband access, and I apologize, households right here, with computer and the number of households in Marathon County with broadband internet subscription. The definitions don't entirely mesh. Everyone defines high-speed internet differently. But this is information that talks about, at least it seems to indicate 88.8% of individuals have an internet subscription, whether that be through a cell phone or through some other form of provision. So that is the kind of the first outcome measure focused kind of information I have on objective 8.7. If you want to have discussions more about the strategies, I think many of you are familiar with a lot of the work done at the county board level, but to the extent that is helpful in terms of what have you actually accomplished in terms of trying to link people to service and expand service, that's objective 8.7. I don't know, Mr. Vice Chair, if you had anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it's primarily the infrastructure and the broadband task force, so there'll be additional information I would think that John would provide next week. But, like you said, it seems like it's been, for the most part, achieved.
I have a question.
Sure.
So where you were showing the drop downs for where people have service, what kind of service they have, and the speed all up on the top left-hand corner there, do we have any idea how much traffic we get for this? How many people actually use these links?
I don't. I can look into whether or not that's something that we can actually find, however. Any other questions on that?
Supervisor Unger?
Thank you, Chair. If we've, hit these markers, are we going to leave them? Or will we change them? Or will we modify or take them out? Just to,
Yeah, I think what you're looking at is the comprehensive plan is going to be updated. There'll be new and additional information. And then from there, it's which are these strategies get generally pulled from that comp plan, and then you determine what the outcome measures are going to be. So, I mean, the potential exists if the task force is still going. I suspect it would still be, next year, it would still be there until that project is completed. But whether you change the outcome measure instead of 85%, maybe it's 90% or something like that. But that would be for the committee to
our
decide,
discussion.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. I will look into that web traffic to see if I can answer that. Then in the area of most prosperous, this committee actually is identified as the lead in a number of areas. Objective 10.6, 10.8, and 10.10. You're identified as the lead. So we'll start with 10.6. Ensure the future availability of a skilled and flexible workforce prepared to meet the needs of both existing and emerging industries and technologies. And I think, again, just to ground everybody, as the vice chair referenced, this strategic plan was from 2018 was when it was first adopted and then extended. Certainly, as Chris alluded to before and Mr. Fawcett from Domtar, a lot of things have happened in the intervening years that workforce challenges are a bit different than or more acute perhaps than they had been at the time this was put in place. But the number and percentage of self-sufficient households in Marathon County will increase or remain the same. The best data that I think, if you're interested in learning more about this, the best place to look is probably Marathon County Pulse has a lot of information that is compiled from various resources. And one of the things you can click on is economic environment, and you'll see information relative to housing values, spending, but also individuals living below the poverty level and children below the poverty level, and you can see some trends relative to that sort of data and how we compare to other, to the rest of the state and across the country. So certainly this information, as well as information from the Marathon County profile information you can find on the United Way, I think gives insight into that ALICE population, asset limited, income constrained, and employed, but also individuals living under the poverty level. Not entirely something that Marathon, certainly not something Marathon County, this strategic plan objective has impact on alone. There's a lot of, whether it's nonprofits or other local governments that have a role, but certainly based on some of the strategies that are listed under 10.6, you can see the county does have an opportunity to impact that in some form or fashion. I don't know if there's any additional information you want there, but I can certainly send out links if you'd prefer. But it's really to stimulate conversation like the vice chair referenced around how are we doing relative to workforce. And Kim is here. If you want to come up, Kim, you can have access to a microphone as well to talk through any of the areas here, because again, Marathon County doesn't have impact on this alone. We rely on a lot of partners, and McDevco is one of those for some of these strategies. I think if you just got to hit the button.
So specifically, the work that we do, when we looked at this outcome measure and we spoke with Lance, we do a lot with the youth coming up through our school system. So we manage the occupancy at the Wausau Business Incubator. So effective outreach to DC Everest and Wausau schools to ensure that our youth know what opportunities are available to them if they were to stay within Marathon County versus leave or if they leave and come back. So, we obviously offer a lot in the space of entrepreneurship and the resources there to attract that talent with the vast amenities we have. But I think that's one of the items that Every year we have about 60 students coming through that we're impacting with these resources and trying to make sure that's at the forefront.
All right, the second indicator relates to the number of unfilled jobs, the idea being by December 31st, 2024, the number of unfilled job openings within Marathon County will be reduced. You can look to a number of areas to try to get good data on that. Kim, I don't know what your sense is, but mine, as I alluded to before, when some of these objectives or outcome measures were started in 2018, the idea was, hey, we'll be able to recruit and fill a lot of jobs. I think as the presentations have gone, as Chris alluded to and Mr. Fawcett, some of the biggest challenges we have is people related. We need to make this area a destination. The demographic shift that Chris referenced, as has been documented by Forward Analytics, the Department of Administration and others, is a challenge. So certainly there are more unfilled jobs now than there were in 2018. And I don't think we're unique in that. That is the norm.
Right, and I think certain industries, it varies. So in the service sector, there's fewer job openings potentially at a restaurant for front of house staff versus a manufacturing operation. I will tell you the revolving loan funds we have administered, we're seeing more machine investments to optimize and modernize their workflow to help address some of those staffing concerns. But to Lance's point, I don't think we're in any worse position than anybody else. I think it's pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah. Outcome measure number 3. This one, I think you can check off. It was by the end of August of 23 with input from county supervisors not on the Extension Education Economic Development Committee, that the committee would prepare recommendations for Marathon County government's role in supporting affordable, high-quality childcare. That was accomplished, and in fact, a resolution was moved forward to the full board. It did not pass, the recommendations from this committee did not pass. They were considered, but ultimately, again, the county board did, following a recommendation from this committee, did authorize expenditure of funds for an education program in connection with child caring. That was done in September of 2024. And I know Kelly's not here, but she did give me a little bit of an update, as alluded to by the chair. That program is ongoing. The first cohort of that training course is about halfway complete, and there are 4 participants right now that are moving forward with securing work in group childcare settings. One actually is already employed, and they're being supported by Child Caring to move forward in that process and try to secure employment. The next set of courses begin in May, and they do have 1 participant enrolled. They're trying to do some work to expand that, the number of people going through to meet that service goal of 30 individuals over the 2 years. But that was Kelly's update right now, and she'll attend future meetings to provide more substantive updates while they when they feel they have that more substantive update to give. But again, the county board did consider some of those recommendations from this committee. Similarly, with respect to outcome measure number 4, that outcome measure relates to recommendations relative to the county government's role in supporting safe and affordable housing options. That was adopted by the full board. This committee moved it forward, and it was adopted by the full board, a resolution in December of 2023, which again, you've talked about a number of things at this committee, including the covenants that I'm sure we'll take up again, addressing tax deed properties and things of that nature. So that outcome measure likewise, for my assessment, you've completed the task that was assigned to you both for objective 3 and 4. Any questions or thoughts? And again, this is just staff giving you the overview. Don't mean to monopolize the conversation or have a one-sided one. But next, we can move on to 10.8. And the first outcome here, again, this is really an area where I think you'll see throughout the strategic plan from 2018, there were a lot of things that were identified that at least in previous committee meetings between myself and the vice chair, we kind of referenced that these aren't areas of direct county control. This is one. Outcome measure number 1, maintain a 5 to 8 year inventory of developable land within municipal business and industrial parks. Marathon County has not for quite a number of years been directly involved in business park formation or management. My understanding, the last time that was done was with the Mosinee, the creation of the Mosinee Business Park, and that was decades ago. So this just hasn't been a priority to look into that inventory. If there's a desire for, as the vice chair referenced, when you do get to the point, the county board gets to the point of updating the comprehensive plan and then identifying strategic plan goals, it would be some effort on the county's behalf to try to bring all of that information together. Outcome measure number 2, by the end of 2024, the number of private sector full and part-time employee positions in the county will increase or be maintained. Again, not an area that Marathon County government has really direct control over. Certainly over the last several years, you're all very well aware through the budget process, we haven't substantially grown our positions. We've added a couple, but not a dramatic increase. And as Kim said, in a lot of industry sectors, there's actually been retraction. There's been strategies employed to kind of reduce in light of the decrease in the number of individuals that are in the workforce or actively engaged in the workforce to try to be as efficient as possible. I don't know, Kim, if there's any additional information you have there.
What I would have to share is, as we are contracted by Marathon County to provide educational resources, private sector, we've mentored over 1,800 entrepreneurs since 2018, since this strategic plan started. So potentially, these might not be folks working necessarily for a company, but they branched off and created or tried to create their own endeavor. So our mentorship has been heavy in that space with the team that we have.
And I was able to pull some information from the Job Center of Wisconsin, and you can go on their website, and if there's a desire, I certainly can share the link, but you can see how Marathon County is situated with respect to adjusted employment, seasonally adjusted employment, the graph on the screen. You'll see the giant dip there, of course. That was early on in 2020. As I referenced before, with the pandemic, there was a lot of a contraction in the workforce, but as is described later in this document, the Marathon County document, really nearly 100% of those jobs have come back over time. And certainly there's continued vacant positions as we referenced before. But again, not something certainly Marathon County is directly the sole impact on, or even I would say a substantial influencer of. We have an impact, that don't mean to minimize that, but there are a lot of other things that kind of flow into that.
I would say in terms of outcome measure number 1, although the county doesn't do it directly, WEDC has a database of available properties called Locate in Wisconsin that keeps track of statewide properties, including many within Marathon County. Speaking for the communities that I know best, Wausau and Croninwetter, I would say that Wausau has a inventory in our business campus that would last 10 to 12 years at this point based on development. We have the only certified site in Marathon County off Innovation Way. In Croninwetter, there's a number of opportunities for development. One of the big things is a floodplain study that's been ongoing for many, many years now that's getting close to completion, which will open up some land that was previously limited for development based on floodplain regulations. That's really the area north of Kowalski, in that area there that goes north up towards Rothschild. So there's some opportunities within Marathon County for development. I would say that we have a surplus, especially based on what seems to be a slowing in new development in the industrial sector.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or if you want other additional information, let me, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, so one thing that comes into my mind when you talk about the business parks, and that is the TID-TIF discussion. And, you almost would think the outcome measure, it's not just the land, it's what is that potential tax return, the revenue. So that's just one thing that popped into my head, if this is something that maybe we do again in the next strategic plan, that maybe that's a consideration in there as well, just as like some sort of annotation.
Yeah, I think that's a great, when we do get into the comprehensive plan and then the strategic plan, if there's a desire, as the Vice Chair, great example, there are other counties that are more active. And again, Marathon County was 20 years ago with the Mosinee development. I know my former colleague from Chippewa County, for example, the county board has adopted a strategy that they do partner very directly with municipalities to, as Committee Vice Chair Pfeiffer referenced, to try to make sure that there's enough industrial park space that's developed. So Chippewa County partners, I believe, with Chippewa, the city, and has expanded their parks. That hasn't been a strategy for Marathon County for, like I said, a great many decades, but as Vice Chair Dickinson said, if this is a desire moving forward, there are some strategies and staff can assist in trying to bring those to you to have the board consider, but yeah, certainly a complex issue.
And just to add on to that, I think the most important thing that the county can do in our current state is focusing on roadways that service our business parks or just industrial land in general. Having them all season roads, it's very difficult for a business to open up and have seasonal limits on roads. It really affects their ability and if they're even going to site there. The other thing is broadband. We've talked about many times. That's a huge thing. And folks that don't have reliable broadband, it's tough to do business. So those are two things that I think from where we're currently at, we can focus on and encourage where we're trying to develop these type of businesses.
All right. Again, moving forward then to objective 10.10. First outcome measure is by the end of 2024, the number of businesses will increase. And again, the way that the county tries to impact that is significantly through McDevco and all of their programs. And then as Vice Chair Pfeiffer referenced, really trying to create an environment where businesses can kind of not only be created, but grow and sustain. I don't know, Kim, if you have any insight on both that measure and the next one on the list, which is directly related to McDevco, that by the end of 2024, we see that those businesses that do receive assistance are sustained for a period.
Yeah, so if I talk about both of these together, I think that'll be helpful. So like I talked about, from 2018 to now, approximately 1,800 entrepreneurs have received assistance. We track our businesses and we utilize the loan funds that we administer on behalf of other partners like Marathon County to assist these entrepreneurs. So we have achieved this outcome measure, especially relating to our loan funds that we administer and the entrepreneurs that have accessed those. We have, so we educate, incubate, and finance entrepreneurship in Marathon County, focusing on the small and expanding businesses. To give you an idea, we're a gap financer, so we're never going to fund a total project, or we're lending a microloan at $25,000. We have about just shy of $500,000 that we'll be dispersing by July, and then we will have come close to exhausting all of the Marathon County $1 million that were committed in 2019 for us to lend out in partnership with the Judd Alexander Foundation. So that's great news, speaking to the amount of entrepreneurship that we've seen happen and the expansions that have taken our partnership. I do want to also point out that we worked with, one of the items in the strategic plan talks about evolving policies, practices, procedures. Coming out of COVID-19, we had dispersed quite a significant amount of COVID funding to our entrepreneurs. What next, I think, was the big question. And we worked closely. You approved modifications to our loan fund to allow us to lend 3% interest loan funds. So these aren't complimentary funds to business owners. It's still a loan that they have to pay back, that they have to budget for and think about as they're working through the growth or non-growth of their business, to be honest. But that's been very helpful as they've needed to make necessary investments in equipment to modernize their workflow due to decreased workforce, or invest in inventory to make the pivots they need to respond to the environment that we're in. So I would say that we've seen a lot of success just relating to dispersing funds, accessing entrepreneurs, and just becoming, something that folks are aware of. So we look at outcome measure 3. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of you. But just really connecting, we have, limited funds to market, but how can we reach more folks through being on Marathon County's page and just being that natural conduit? We do a lot of work with the City of Wausau Community and Economic Development Department. So how are we accessing and reaching more entrepreneurs? And I think more importantly, you have small municipalities that don't have the tit or tiff land resources that larger municipalities do. So we oftentimes are that tool in their toolbox. So making sure that we're not only accessible to the entrepreneurs, but to the people on the front lines that have the direct access to the entrepreneurs that can access resources to get their business objectives met through us.
So Kim alluded to this already. So one of the, again, low-hanging fruit in terms of outcome measures was by reference in Objective 3 was to get some links to McDevco on the county's homepage to try to make that more well-known. And we have done that under projects and planning. You can see there's the economic development section, and it links to that external webpage, along with some other areas that through the chamber. But click on McDevco and it does redirect us to mcdevco.org. I think one other thing that county staff have tried to move forward with, working with Kim and her team, is to get that message out. So we do participate actively in the municipality meetings that McDevco holds on a quarterly basis to try to talk about what are the opportunities, what's happening within Marathon County government, and what might the municipalities need from the county, or what information the municipalities can share with each other to kind of make sure that we are attractive to businesses looking to relocate, or even just keeping the businesses here that we have. All right. Thanks, Kim. Gonna jump back here. And then lastly, 10.12. I didn't have a whole lot of time to pull a lot of this information together, and Mr. Griesbach will have to bring some of this back, but I can report within your budget document, the first goal is referenced on an ongoing basis. It's a data point that we do track. And that is to maintain a county highway and overall PACER rating, or pavement service evaluation rating score. Average rating is 7. And when you do look back over time with the county's PACER rating score back in 2015, I apologize, let me pull this up on my computer here. In 2015, that the goal was still that 7. We were at about a 6.6. Currently, we've been able to get that above 7. We're at about 7.05. That was our rate at the end of 2023. It was referenced in the 2025 budget. That does require, as was alluded to before, a pretty significant ongoing capital contribution from the county, given that we have 614 miles of county trunk highways. And I think Committee Vice Chair Pfeiffer made a good reference. One of the things that can't remember how long ago it was, but the Infrastructure Committee did approve some all-season roadway upgrades into ingress and egress out of a business park. So certainly something we track. With respect to the next two, I can get better information on these. I wasn't able to confer with Commissioner Griesbach before today's meeting. But one of the measures that was implemented was periodic updates relative to safety planning and safety plan related projects. And in fact, there was just a presentation, I believe it was last month, to the Infrastructure Committee about some of those safety plans and what, if any, implementation would flow from them. I know one of the big areas of discussion has been around accommodating multimodal transportation on county highways. A lot of discussion about center line rumble strips, edge line rumble strips, and mumble strips, which are a variation of those things. So all tools in the toolbox, as was referenced before, in terms of countermeasures for safety, and the Infrastructure Committee is, I think, frequently having those conversations. So that was relatively quick that I burned through from largely a data perspective on some of those outcome measures, but happy to try to answer questions, or as I alluded to before, if there's a question you have that staff can't answer today, we'll strive to get that information for you.
Anything further from the group? No, thank you. McDevco, do you have anything you want to add? No? Okay. And then we have F, UW Extension, introducing Patrick Gatterman as new Extension Director. Welcome.
Yeah, and I can give a quick little spiel on where I've come from and what I do. So previously, I worked as the director of the Small Business Development Center. Has anyone other than Kim or Randy or Chris or Lance heard of the Small Business Development Center? Right? So it's kind of like one of those best kept secrets out there. There's an SBDC at every campus in the state of Wisconsin, every one in the state of the nation, large organization funded by the SBA. I happen to be the director of a 9-county region which covered Marathon County. So that's why I worked with Randy the city, Kim and Medevco. We've been partners for mine for many years. Before that, I owned my own private business in Stevens Point, so I do come from a private business background. I won't give it before that, but I will say I'm a born and raised Blue Jay. Not a single boo. I love that when I'm sitting in a Marathon County meeting. That's great. But reason I kind of came to this position was I have a passion for extension. I grew up in 4-H. You know, I didn't live on a farm, but I grew up on a farm. So I showed cattle at Lincoln County Fair. But there's other things extension does. So I didn't realize until I started working at the SBDC that extension does economic development, extension does food education, it does elderly education, it does many, many things. To be honest, there's probably a million different rabbit holes extension could go down. But being the new extension director, I am the acting department head. So my role would be budget, supervising of the staff, organizing a new move, great space, emailing during the meeting to Chris. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm really happy to be here. So partnerships, any questions, definitely, I'd love to entertain, but I don't want to take any more of your time. I know I'm kind of bordering on that time, so thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? No? Excellent. Okay. 8, next meeting date and time announcements and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. And B, next meeting Thursday, May 1st, 2025 at 3 p.m. So we could have a motion for adjournment, please. Motion by Rosenberg. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
I think these meetings are too short, just come to ERC.
I can take an hour and a half.
I don't look forward to that.